The silence aboard Earth Command Headquarters was broken only by the soft beeping of monitors and the occasional rustle of officers moving between stations. Captain Samantha Rogers stared at the main screen, her cup of coffee growing cold in her hand. It was supposed to be a routine day. Reports to file, schedules to approve, the usual administrative tasks that came with overseeing the communications hub for Earth's defense network. The alert came without warning. A sharp tone cut through the quiet hum of the command center, drawing every eye to the emergency channel display. "What is it, Lieutenant?" Samantha asked, setting down her cup and crossing the room in 4 quick strides. Lieutenant Gray Harrison's fingers flew over his console. "Distress signal, Captain, from the UESS Mercy." Samantha felt her stomach tighten. The Mercy wasn't just any ship. It was Earth's largest hospital vessel, currently on a humanitarian mission to the struggling colonies in the Ta City system. It carried over 2,000 patients and medical staff. "Put it through," she ordered. The signal was broken, filled with static. "Under attack." "Repeat. Hospital ship Mercy under attack. Shields failing. They know we're unarmed. Please." The transmission cut off in a burst of electronic noise. "Get them back." Samantha's voice remained steady, but her knuckles whitened as she gripped the edge of the console. Greg shook his head. "No response, Captain. I'm trying all frequencies. Run a scan of the area. I want to know who's attacking the clearly marked hospital ship." She turned to face the room. "And someone wake up Admiral Blackwell." The minutes that followed were a flurry of activity. The long-range scanners took time to focus on the distant sector, but when the data finally appeared on screen, the room fell silent again. "Arcturus ships," said Officer Patricia Wells from the tactical station. 3 of them. Warships. Samantha stared at the display in disbelief. The Arcturus Collective had maintained an uneasy peace with Earth for nearly 15 years. They were calculating, sometimes hostile in negotiations, but never openly aggressive. Attacking a hospital ship wasn't just an act of war, it was a violation of every treaty and humanitarian agreement in known space. "The Mercy is still transmitting data," Greg said suddenly. "Not voice communications, but their automated systems are sending updates on damage, and..." He paused, looking up with wide eyes. "Life support is failing in sections B through F." Samantha closed her eyes briefly. Those were the primary patient care areas. "Do we have a roster of who's aboard?" she asked. Patricia nodded. "Just coming through now. Medical staff includes..." "Wait." Her voice changed. "Dr. Alan Wright is aboard." A murmur ran through the command center. Even Samantha couldn't hide her reaction. Dr. Wright was perhaps the most important xenobiologist in the United Alliance. His recent breakthrough in cross-species medical treatment had been hailed as the most significant advancement since first contact. If he died in an Arcturus attack, the diplomatic fallout would be catastrophic. The doors to the command center slid open. Admiral John Blackwell strode in, his uniform hastily donned but his eyes alert. "Report," he said simply. Samantha quickly summarized what they knew. The Admiral listened without interruption, his face growing grimmer with each detail. "The Mercy carries no weapons," he said when she finished. "Its hull markings are visible from 10 million kilometers. There is no possible way the Arcturus mistook it for a military vessel." "What are your orders, sir?" Samantha asked. Admiral Blackwell looked around the room, meeting the eyes of every officer present. "This is not a random act. This is a deliberate message." His voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the room. "And Earth will answer it. Captain Rogers, send priority Alpha communications to all fleet vessels. As of this moment, we are at war." Samantha nodded and turned to her station. As she began the process that would mobilize Earth's war fleet for the first time in a generation, a single thought kept running through her mind. Why would anyone target a ship dedicated to healing? Admiral John Blackwell stood at the center of the United Earth Defense Council chamber, his back straight and his voice firm. The room was filled with the most powerful people on Earth, gathered on short notice after the attack on the Mercy. The large screens on the wall showed the hospital ship's last known location, now just a scatter of debris, and an ion trail leading deep into Arcturus space. They didn't just attack a ship, Admiral Blackwell said, his eyes moving from one council member to another. They attacked everything we stand for. The Mercy was on a humanitarian mission, clearly marked, carrying no weapons. This was not a mistake. Council President William Clark leaned forward. What do we know about the attack itself? Do we have any survivors? Captain Samantha Rogers stepped forward with a tablet in her hand. The Mercy's last transmission indicated they were being boarded, not destroyed. We believe the Arcturus forces captured the ship and its crew. A murmur ran through the room. Capture was unexpected. The Arcturus Collective usually showed little interest in taking prisoners. Why would they want a hospital ship? Asked Defense Minister Richard Gordon. What possible use could it serve? From the corner of the room, a woman in a navy blue diplomatic uniform raised her hand. Elise Donovan, Earth's chief diplomatic officer for non-human relations, had been unusually quiet until now. "May I speak, Mr. President?" she asked. President Clark nodded. "Something about this situation doesn't add up," Elise said. "I've worked with Arcturus representatives for 8 years now. They're calculating and sometimes harsh, but never rash. Every action they take has a clear purpose." She paused. An unprovoked attack on a hospital ship would bring the full might of Earth against them. They must want something badly enough to risk war. Admiral Blackwell frowned. What could be so valuable on a hospital ship? The doors to the council chamber slid open, and a man in a dark uniform hurried in. Intelligence Officer Kevin Martinez looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Apologies for the interruption," he said, "but I have information that can't wait." He approached the central table and inserted a data drive into the display system. "We've intercepted communications between Arcturus vessels." The screens changed to show a series of translated messages. Kevin highlighted one section. They specifically mentioned the Mercy by name. They refer to the prize and the key being aboard. "Dr. Wright," Samantha said quietly. "They must be after Dr. Wright or his research." Kevin nodded. "That's our assessment. Dr. Wright's recent breakthrough in xenobiology could transform medicine for all species. It's possible the Arcturus want that knowledge for themselves." President Clark stood up slowly. "So they attacked a hospital ship to kidnap our leading scientist. This is worse than we thought." Admiral Blackwell turned to face the president directly. "Sir, I recommend an immediate military response. We need to deploy the full war fleet. We must show the Arcturus and every other civilization watching that Earth will not allow its citizens to be taken, especially not from a vessel protected by every treaty in existence." Elise Donovan shook her head. "Admiral, I urge caution. If we deploy the war fleet, we're committing to full-scale conflict. Thousands will die on both sides. And if we do nothing," Admiral Blackwell countered, "how many hospital ships will they take next? How many scientists will they kidnap? Sometimes peace must be defended with force." The room fell silent as all eyes turned to President Clark. He looked tired suddenly, the weight of the decision visible on his face. "Put it to a vote," he said finally. "All in favor of deploying Earth's war fleet to rescue the Mercy and her crew." One by one, hands rose around the table. Even Elise reluctantly raised hers. The vote was unanimous. President Clark nodded grimly. "Admiral Blackwell, you have your orders. For the first time since the Centauri conflict, Earth goes to war. May God help us all." As the council members filed out, Kevin Martinez caught up with Admiral Blackwell and Samantha in the hallway. "There's something else," he said in a low voice. "Something not in my official report." He glanced around to make sure they were alone. The Arcturus messages, they didn't come from their central command. This attack may not have been ordered by their government at all. The skies above Earth's orbital shipyards blazed with activity. Massive vessels moved into formation, their engines glowing blue against the darkness of space. Supply ships darted between the larger craft, delivering last-minute provisions and ammunition. It was the first full deployment of Earth's war fleet in 15 years. Engineer Maria Lopes wiped sweat from her forehead as she studied the readouts on her tablet. She had been working for 36 hours straight, overseeing the installation of the new phase shield technology on the fleet's vessels. "How's it looking?" asked Captain Frank Daniels, commander of the massive dreadnought UES Defender, the fleet's flagship. Maria sighed. "We've got the system installed on 80% of the ships. The rest will have to manage with standard shields." Captain Daniels frowned. The Arcturus weapons cut through standard shields like they're paper. "I know," Maria said, "but we can't delay the launch any longer. The Mercy and her crew don't have time." Captain Daniels nodded and looked out the viewport at the assembling fleet. The Defender was the largest warship ever built by human hands, nearly 2 kilometers long. Around it gathered cruisers, destroyers, and smaller, faster attack vessels. Each one carried soldiers ready to fight for Earth. On the lower decks of the Defender, Sergeant Eric Palmer sat on his bunk, recording a message on his personal device. "Hey, Becca," he said softly, trying to keep his voice steady. "By the time you get this, we'll be headed into Arcturus space. The news probably says we're going to rescue the Mercy. And that's true. But everyone here knows this might turn into something bigger." He paused. "I don't know when I'll be back. Take care of Mom and Dad. Tell Billy to finish school. I love you, sis." Similar scenes played out across the fleet as soldiers and crew members recorded what might be their final messages to loved ones. In the medical bay of the Defender, Dr. Olivia Nelson organized supplies and prepared her staff for potential casualties. A former colleague of Dr. Wright, she had been reassigned to the fleet specifically because of her knowledge of xenobiology. "Doctor, we've received the Arcturus medical files you requested," said a young nurse, handing her a tablet. Dr. Nelson scrolled through the information. "Their biology is so different from ours," she murmured. "If we take prisoners, treating them will be challenging." "Why would we bother?" the nurse asked. "After what they did to the Mercy." Dr. Nelson looked up sharply. "Because we're doctors. We treat everyone, regardless of species or politics. That's what separates us from them." On the bridge of the Defender, Admiral Blackwell reviewed the final launch preparations with his officers. Intelligence Officer Kevin Martinez provided updates on the Mercy's possible location, based on the ion trail and intercepted communications. "We believe they've taken the ship to this sector," Kevin said, pointing to a star system near the border of Arcturus space. "It's sparsely populated, mainly research outposts." Admiral Blackwell studied the map. "That will be our first stop. Captain Daniels, is the fleet ready?" Captain Daniels straightened. "Yes, Admiral. All ships report ready for jump." Admiral Blackwell turned to face the main viewport, where Earth hummed like a blue jewel against the blackness. "Send the command to all vessels," he said. "The war fleet departs in 10 minutes." As the countdown began, Captain Samantha Rogers joined Admiral Blackwell on the bridge, having transferred from Earth Command to serve as his communications officer. "Do you think the Arcturus will back down when they see our full fleet?" she asked quietly. Admiral Blackwell shook his head. They knew what they were doing when they took the Mercy. This won't end quickly. The massive engines of the fleet began to glow brighter as the countdown reached its final seconds. Across Earth, billions of people watched on their screens as humanity's armada prepared to venture into enemy space. With a flash of light that briefly outshone the sun, the war fleet jumped into hyperspace, leaving Earth behind. Their mission: to rescue a hospital ship and its crew. But many aboard wondered if they would return to a galaxy at peace or one consumed by war. The UESS Defender dropped out of hyperspace at the coordinates where the Mercy had last been detected. The rest of Earth's war fleet followed, forming a defensive pattern around the flagship. The bridge crew of the Defender stared at their screens in silence. "Scan the area," ordered Admiral Blackwell. "I want to know what happened here." Captain Samantha Rogers worked at her console, directing the ship's sensors. I'm detecting debris, sir. Not enough for a whole ship, but definitely from the Mercy. And there's an ion trail leading deeper into Arcturus space. Admiral Blackwell's face hardened. So they damaged the ship and took it somewhere else. Sir, called out the sensor operator. 3 Arcturus vessels approaching from the nearby moon. They're powering weapons. Raise shields, Captain Daniels commanded, but hold fire until they shoot first. The Arcturus ships were small compared to the Defender, but their distinctive crescent shape was unmistakable. They moved in formation, approaching the Earth fleet with obvious hostile intent. They're hailing us, Samantha reported. On screen, said Admiral Blackwell. The main display flickered to show an Arcturus commander. The alien's gray skin and 4 eyes were familiar to everyone on the bridge, though few had seen one in person. Earth vessels, the Arcturus said, its translator converting the clicks and whistles of its language into English. You are trespassing in collective space. Leave immediately or be destroyed. Admiral Blackwell stepped forward. I am Admiral John Blackwell of the United Earth Defense Force. We're tracking a stolen Earth vessel, the hospital ship Mercy. Stand down and assist us, or be considered part of this act of war. The Arcturus commander made a sound that the translator didn't catch. Then, without warning, the alien ships opened fire. All vessels returned fire. Admiral Blackwell ordered, target their engines and weapons only if possible. The space between the fleets lit up with energy beams and missile trails. The Earth ships' new phase shields glowed blue as they absorbed the Arcturus weapons. The battle was swift and one-sided. Earth's military technology, developed over years of preparing for just such a conflict, proved far superior. 2 of the Arcturus ships exploded into fragments. The third drifted powerless, its engines destroyed by precision fire from the Defender. Prepare a boarding party, Admiral Blackwell said. I want prisoners for questioning. Marine Commander Kelly Rodriguez led the boarding team. They crossed to the damaged Arcturus vessel in armored shuttles, cutting their way through the hull when the aliens refused to allow them entry through the airlocks. Inside, the Marines moved carefully through the curved corridors, their weapons ready. They found most of the crew dead or badly injured. Only 5 Arcturus remained alive and able to surrender. Secure them and bring them to the Defender, Commander Rodriguez ordered. Dr. Nelson will want to treat their injuries. Back on the Defender, Dr. Olivia Nelson prepared the isolation ward for the alien prisoners. When they arrived, she worked quickly to stabilize their conditions, using her knowledge of Arcturus biology. One of the aliens, less injured than the others, watched her with all 4 eyes. Why do you help us? It asked through its translator. We are enemies. I'm a doctor. Dr. Nelson replied simply. I help everyone. In the ship's conference room, Admiral Blackwell, Captain Daniels, and Intelligence Officer Kevin Martinez prepared to interrogate the highest-ranking Arcturus prisoner, the ship's second officer. Where is the Mercy? Admiral Blackwell demanded when the alien was brought in. The Arcturus looked at each human in turn. I do not know. We were not part of that operation. Don't lie to us, Kevin said sharply. We know your forces took the ship. The alien made a gesture that might have been a shrug. Not our forces, not official Arcturus military. The humans exchanged confused glances. Explain. Admiral Blackwell ordered. The attack on your healing ship was not ordered by our government, the Arcturus said. It was the faction of diplomat Sorrel. They seek Dr. Wright and his research. Why? Asked Captain Daniels. The alien's 4 eyes blinked slowly. To save our people from extinction. A plague spreads on our homeworld. Millions have died. It paused. Sorrel believes Dr. Wright's work is our only hope. Admiral Blackwell called an emergency meeting in the Defender's command center. The room was tense as the fleet's top officers gathered around the large table. Captain Frank Daniels and Captain Samantha Rogers sat opposite each other, while Dr. Olivia Nelson and Intelligence Officer Kevin Martinez took seats nearby. Commander Kelly Rodriguez stood by the door, still in her Marine combat gear. "So we have a situation," Admiral Blackwell began. "The Arcturus government may not be behind the attack on the Mercy. Instead, we're dealing with a faction led by someone named Diplomat Coral." Kevin nodded. "Our prisoner says this Coral acted without official approval. He was desperate to get Dr. Wright's research to fight a plague on their homeworld." "Can we trust what the prisoner says?" Captain Daniels asked. "This could be a trick to divide our forces." Dr. Nelson cleared her throat. "Actually, I believe the prisoner is telling the truth about the plague. I've been studying the medical data we have on the Arcturus, and there are reports of a major disease outbreak in their central systems. Their government has been keeping it quiet, but the death toll is already in the millions." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. "So what's our next move?" Commander Rodriguez asked finally. "Do we still head for Arcturus Prime to demand the Mercy's return?" Admiral Blackwell studied the star map displayed on the table. "I believe we should. If this Coral acted without approval, the Arcturus government might be willing to help us to avoid all-out war." "I disagree," Captain Daniels said firmly. "Taking the entire fleet to their homeworld could be seen as an invasion. We should send a smaller force to find the Mercy, while the main fleet remains at a safe distance." As the officers debated, Dr. Nelson was examining data on her tablet. She suddenly looked up, her face pale. "The plague affecting the Arcturus," she said. "I've been comparing its structure to known diseases in our database. It's remarkably similar to the colony fever that nearly wiped out New Haven Colony 30 years ago. Is that significant?" Admiral Blackwell asked. Dr. Nelson nodded slowly. "Colony fever was eventually cured by Dr. Elizabeth Foster. She was Dr. Wright's teacher and mentor." She paused. "If the Arcturus plague is similar, Dr. Wright's recent breakthrough might indeed be their best hope for a cure." The implications hung in the air. If the Arcturus were facing extinction, their desperate actions made more sense. "Sir," Samantha said suddenly, "Communications Officer Heather Phillips is picking up a weak signal. It might be from the Mercy." Admiral Blackwell straightened. "Put her through." Heather's voice came over the room's speakers. "Admiral, we've detected a narrow-band transmission using an Earth military emergency frequency. It's very weak and encoded, but I've managed to partially decrypt it." "What does it say?" Admiral Blackwell asked. "It's from Nurse Paul Bennett, sir. He was on the Mercy. The message says they're being held at a research facility on the largest moon of Arcturus Prime. He reports that the medical staff are being treated well, but are forced to work on finding a cure for the Arcturus plague." "Any mention of Dr. Wright?" Kevin asked. "Yes," Heather replied. "The message says Dr. Wright is cooperating with their captors. He's chosen to help them after learning about the plague." Commander Rodriguez snorted. "Stockholm Syndrome. Or compassion," Dr. Nelson countered. "Ellen, Dr. Wright, always said medicine shouldn't be limited by species or politics." Admiral Blackwell stood up and walked to the viewport. The stars of Arcturus space glittered coldly back at him. "So now we have a divided fleet, a divided Arcturus government, and apparently divided loyalties among our own people," he said quietly. "This is becoming more complicated by the hour." "What are your orders, sir?" Captain Daniels asked. Admiral Blackwell turned back to face them. "We need more information before we commit to a course of action. Captain Rogers, continue attempts to communicate with the Mercy. Dr. Nelson, learn everything you can about this plague. Commander Rodriguez, prepare a small team for a possible covert mission." He looked around the table, meeting each officer's eyes. "The Mercy was taken because it represents the best of humanity, our commitment to healing and helping others. Whatever we do next must honor that same commitment. We will not let anger cloud our judgment or turn us into the very thing we're fighting against." Commander Kelly Rodriguez checked her gear one last time as the small shuttle prepared to leave the Defender. Her team was small but skilled. Dr. Olivia Nelson for medical expertise, communications specialist Tim Russell to handle any tech they encountered, and tech specialist Vincent Carter, who knew Arcturus systems better than anyone else in the fleet. Everyone clear on the mission? Commander Rodriguez asked, her voice low. They all nodded. Their goal was simple but dangerous. Infiltrate the research facility on Arcturus Prime's largest moon, assess the situation with the Mercy's crew, and extract Dr. Wright if possible. Remember, Dr. Nelson said, we don't know the full story yet. We go in quiet and gather information first. The shuttle had been modified using technology from the captured Arcturus vessel. Its hull now reflected the energy signature of a small Arcturus transport, which should allow them to approach the moon without raising alarms. Admiral Blackwell's voice came through the comm system. The main fleet will hold position at the edge of the system. We'll create a small distraction to draw attention away from the moon. You'll have 12 hours before we need to pull back. Understood, Admiral, Commander Rodriguez replied. We'll make them count. The shuttle slipped away from the Defender, its engines barely visible against the darkness of space. Behind them, the Earth fleet began a series of maneuvers designed to look like they were preparing for a major assault on a different part of the system. 3 hours later, the team's shuttle touched down in a maintenance bay on the far side of the research facility. They moved silently through service corridors, using the schematics Vincent had pulled from Arcturus databases. The main labs should be 2 levels up, Vincent whispered, consulting his device. That's where they likely keep Dr. Wright and the other medical personnel. As they made their way through the facility, they noticed something strange. There were few guards, and the Arcturus scientists they glimpsed seemed focused entirely on their work, not on keeping prisoners. This doesn't feel like a hostage situation, Tim observed. Finally, they reached a large laboratory complex. Through the windows, they could see human medical staff working alongside Arcturus scientists. In the center of it all stood Dr. Alan Wright, gesturing at a holographic display as he explained something to an attentive audience of both species. Commander Rodriguez frowned. What is going on here? Dr. Nelson studied the scene. They're collaborating, not being forced. They waited until a human lab assistant stepped out into the corridor, then quickly pulled her aside. The young woman's eyes widened in fear, then relief when she saw they were human. Earth sent you. Thank goodness, she said. I'm Lisa Chen. I was a junior researcher on the Mercy. We're here to rescue you, Commander Rodriguez said. Where are the guards? How many of our people are being held here? Lisa looked confused. Guards? No one is holding us against our will. Not anymore. Well, we can't leave the facility, but that's because of the quarantine protocols. Dr. Nelson stepped forward. What happened, Lisa? Why are you all working with the people who attacked your ship? Lisa sighed. It's complicated. Yes, they attacked us, and it was terrifying. But once we arrived here, Diplomat Thorl explained everything about the plague. Dr. Wright insisted on seeing the affected patients. Her voice dropped. It's horrible. Children and elderly dying by the thousands each day. So Wright just decided to help his kidnappers. Commander Rodriguez asked skeptically. Lisa nodded. He said that withholding medical knowledge that could save millions would violate his oath as a doctor. Most of us agreed with him. We're medical personnel. Helping people is what we do, regardless of species or politics. Dr. Nelson smiled slightly. That sounds like Alan. Can you take us to him? Tim asked. Lisa led them through a series of labs to a private office where Dr. Wright was working alone. The renowned scientist looked tired but determined. He showed no surprise when the rescue team entered. I wondered when Earth would send someone, he said calmly. I'm guessing the war fleet is out there. The entire fleet, Commander Rodriguez confirmed. We came to take you home. Dr. Wright shook his head. I can't leave. Not yet. We're close to a breakthrough. The Arcturus plague is a variant of colony fever. My mentor's work is the foundation, but we need to adapt it to their biology. These people kidnapped you, Commander Rodriguez reminded him. And that was wrong, Dr. Wright agreed. But letting millions die when I can help would be equally wrong. Two wrongs don't make a right, Commander. Before anyone could respond, alarms began to blare throughout the facility. The alarms echoed through the research facility. Red lights flashed in the corridors as an automated voice spoke in both Arcturus language and English. Attention. Security breach. All personnel report to safe areas. This is not a drill. Dr. Wright rushed to a computer terminal. Something's wrong. These aren't intruder alarms. Lisa Chen's face went pale. It's an attack. The main Arcturus military found us. As if to confirm her words, a distant explosion shook the building. Commander Rodriguez immediately switched to soldier mode. We need to move. Now, Dr. Wright, you're coming with us whether you want to or not. Tim Russell checked a small device on his wrist. Commander, the shuttle is still secure, but scanner shows multiple Arcturus military vessels entering the moon's atmosphere. Dr. Wright shook his head firmly. I can't leave. Not yet. My research. Can you transfer it? Dr. Nelson asked quickly. Download it to something portable. Wright hesitated, then nodded. Most of it. Give me 2 minutes. As Wright worked frantically at the terminal, Commander Rodriguez organized the group. Tim, contact the Defender. Tell them the situation. Vincent, find us the fastest route out of here. Dr. Nelson, are there other Mercy crew members we need to extract? Before Dr. Nelson could answer, another explosion rocked the facility, much closer this time. The lights flickered. Done, Dr. Wright said, holding up a small data device. Everything we've learned about adapting the colony fever cure to Arcturus biology. The door to the lab burst open. Several Arcturus in military uniforms rushed in, weapons raised. Behind them stood a taller Arcturus in elaborate civilian clothing. Diplomat Floral, Lisa whispered to the rescue team. Floral stepped forward, all 4 eyes fixed on the humans. Dr. Wright, you must leave immediately. Take your people and go. What's happening? Wright demanded. Central Command discovered our operation. Floral said quickly. They consider my actions treasonous. They would rather let millions die than accept help from humans. Another explosion, closer still. Part of the ceiling collapsed at the far end of the lab. My security team will hold them off while you escape. Floral continued. But you must take our scientists with you. They will be executed for working with humans. Commander Rodriguez looked skeptical. Why should we trust you? Because we both want the same thing. Sorrel replied. To save lives. I was wrong to attack your hospital ship. I was desperate. But Dr. Wright showed me a better way. Cooperation, not conflict. Dr. Wright turned to Commander Rodriguez. Kelly, we have to take them with us. Rodriguez hesitated only a moment before nodding sharply. Fine, but we move now. Vincent, get us to the shuttle. They hurried through corridors filled with smoke and the sounds of fighting. 3 Arcturus scientists joined their group, carrying additional research materials. Dr. Wright stumbled as they ran, clutching his side. Elen. Dr. Nelson called out, rushing to support him. Dr. Wright pulled his hand away from his side, revealing the spreading red stain. It's nothing. Piece of debris when the ceiling fell. Dr. Nelson quickly examined the wound. This isn't debris. You've been shot. The angle. She looked back toward where Sorrel's security team was fighting. One of the Arcturus military forces must have hit you. She applied pressure to the wound as they continued moving. By the time they reached the shuttle, Dr. Wright was pale and barely conscious. Dr. Nelson guided him to a seat while the others quickly prepared for takeoff. Stay with me, Alan, she urged as she began treating his wound. We need you. Dr. Wright's eyes fluttered open. Olivia, he whispered. There's something you need to know about the plague. She leaned closer to hear him over the sound of the shuttle's engines starting up. I've been studying the plague's structure, Wright said, his voice growing weaker. It's not natural. It shows signs of engineering, the same markers we found in bioweapons from Earth's last civil war. Dr. Nelson froze. What are you saying? Dr. Wright gripped her hand with surprising strength. Someone from Earth may have deliberately introduced this plague to the Arcturus population. This might be our fault. As the shuttle lifted off, the research facility behind them erupted in flames. Through the viewport, they could see Arcturus military ships converging on their position. "We've got company," Vincent called from the pilot's seat. "And they don't look friendly." The shuttle raced away from the moon. 5 Arcturus military vessels in close pursuit. Inside, Vincent Carter pushed the engines beyond safe limits, while Tim Russell frantically worked the communications system. "I can't reach the Defender," Tim said. "The Arcturus are jamming all frequencies." Commander Rodriguez looked out the viewport. The Earth fleet was visible in the distance, but they seemed to be preparing for battle. Admiral Blackwell had no way of knowing that the shuttle carried not just his rescue team, but also Arcturus scientists and vital information about the plague. "They'll shoot us down before we can explain," Vincent said, his eyes fixed on the approaching Arcturus ships. Dr. Olivia Nelson looked up from where she was treating Dr. Wright. "His condition is getting worse. I need proper medical facilities soon." Commander Rodriguez made a decision. "Vincent, set course directly between the fleets." "That's suicide," Vincent protested. "We'll be caught in the crossfire when they start shooting." "Exactly," Rodriguez said grimly. "They won't fire if we're in the middle." As the shuttle changed course, Dr. Wright regained consciousness briefly. "The data," he whispered. "Make sure, both sides, get it. Save your strength," Dr. Nelson told him gently. On the Defender's bridge, Admiral Blackwell watched as the Arcturus fleet moved into attack formation. Beside him, Captain Daniels was giving orders to prepare all weapons. "Sir," called a sensor operator, "there's a small vessel approaching from the moon. It appears to be an Arcturus shuttle, but its flight pattern is unusual." "On screen," Admiral Blackwell ordered. The main display showed the shuttle flying directly toward the space between the two fleets, pursued by Arcturus military ships. "Magnify," Blackwell said suddenly. Something about the shuttle seemed familiar. The image zoomed in, showing clear signs of Earth technology, despite the Arcturus energy signature. "That's our rescue team," Captain Samantha Rogers said. "But why are they flying toward us like that?" Before anyone could answer, the communication system crackled. Through heavy static, Commander Rodriguez's voice broke through. "Defender, this is rescue team. Do not, repeat, do not open fire. We have Arcturus scientists and critical information." The signal cut out as the jamming intensified. Admiral Blackwell turned to Captain Daniels. "Hold all weapons. Something's happening that we don't understand yet." Inside the shuttle, Tim had an idea. "The Arcturus are jamming normal frequencies, but what about visual signals?" "Like what?" Commander Rodriguez asked. "Like this." Tim hurried to the shuttle's exterior light controls. He began flashing them in a pattern that any Earth ship would recognize, old-fashioned Morse code. On the Defender, a communications officer noticed the flashing lights. "Sir, the shuttle is sending a message in Morse code. It says, 'Plague engineered. Maybe from Earth. Dr. Wright dying. Need both sides to talk.'" Admiral Blackwell's face paled. "What have we stumbled into?" The shuttle was now directly between the two fleets, a tiny vessel in a vast gulf of space, with weapons on both sides pointed toward it. "They'll destroy the shuttle to silence the truth," Captain Rogers said quietly. Admiral Blackwell stood up. "Not if I can help it." He turned to communications. "Broadcast on all frequencies, maximum power. Cut through that jamming." The shuttle systems suddenly lit up as a powerful signal broke through the Arcturus jamming. "This is Admiral John Blackwell of Earth. To all vessels, hold your fire. The shuttle between our fleets carries scientists from both our worlds, and information critical to millions of lives. I propose an immediate ceasefire and direct communication between our forces. For several tense moments, there was no response. Then a new voice came through, deep, formal, speaking English with an artificial precision. "This is High Commander Valtic of the Arcturus Central Fleet. We are aware of the unauthorized actions of Diplomat Sorrel. Why should we not destroy all evidence of this treasonous collaboration?" Admiral Blackwell took a deep breath. "Because, Commander Valtic, we have reason to believe the plague affecting your people may have originated on Earth. If that's true, then we have a moral obligation to help you find a cure." The silence that followed seemed to stretch forever. In the shuttle, Dr. Nelson continued fighting to keep Dr. Wright alive, while the Arcturus scientists watched the standoff with all four eyes wide in fear. Finally, High Commander Valtic spoke again. "The shuttle may approach the Arcturus command vessel. Admiral Blackwell may bring one ship to join us. The rest of both fleets will maintain position. We will discuss this together." 1 month later, the UESS Mercy, fully repaired and restaffed, returned to Arcturus space. This time, it came openly on a humanitarian mission. Captain Samantha Rogers stood on the bridge as the massive hospital ship approached the Arcturus homeworld. The Mercy carried 2 precious cargoes: the cure for the plague, developed by Earth and Arcturus scientists working together, and a memorial to Dr. Alan Wright, who had not survived his injuries, but whose final discovery had led to peace instead of war. As the Mercy docked at the Arcturus space station, Captain Rogers thought that sometimes the greatest victories came not from deploying weapons, but from deploying compassion.